All right, so in this week's episode of Learning Java, we are going to be talking about condition statements. So, what are condition statements? Condition statements are basically going to be, well, statements that match a condition. These are going to be your if statements and your else. So this is the primary and the most basic one, the if and the else statements. So to give an example, we are going to go ahead and let's just call this variable I, which is an integer. And we're going to go ahead and create this condition statement called the if else condition. So what we're going to do is we type out if, and in the brackets here we are going to have it meet a specific condition. So we're going to say if I is going to be less than 0, we are going to say what are we going to output here? We are going to output system.out.println, and we're going to say I is negative, meaning that if it is less than 0, it's got to be a negative number, right? That's how math works. Next one, we are going to put the else, which is going to be if it's not going to be a negative number, well, it must be a positive number. So let's go ahead and type system.out.println, and we are then going to call this I is positive. So we have this all set up here. So let's go ahead and run this command, and we'll see what it goes ahead and executes. So let's go ahead and execute that now, and it says I is positive. So how did it get to this specific condition here? So we started off as I is assigned 0, and it's going to look at this first condition, and it's going to say, okay, well, is I less than 0? Well, I is not less than 0. It's actually 0, so it must be a positive number, technically speaking, based on how this is all set up here. Now, if we were to go ahead and put this as -1, and we were to go ahead and run it, it's going to say I is negative. Again, why is that the case? Because it's going to come here to this first if statement, and then it's going to look at the value of I, which is going to be -1. It's going to say, is I less than 0? Well, yes, -1 is less than 0, and that's how we get this first statement here. So this is just your most basic common condition statement, the if else statement. If we were to go ahead and put this as 30, it would definitely be this would definitely be greater than 0, and it's going to say I is positive, which is the case here. Now, sometimes you have what is called an if else if, and it is, oh sorry, I just screwed that up. It's called an if else if and else statement. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to modify our lines of code here to say else if. And once we have else if, we are going to need another condition here. Let's just say I is, we're just going to go ahead and put back, is this it? I is less than 0. And okay, let me just go ahead and put it in first, and then kind of figure out the logic here as I go. This is the beauty of live streaming, so we can definitely go ahead as we go. All right, so this is all set up here. Let me just check. Okay, so that's going to be a little bit later in the video when I do another condition statement. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through all the just the syntax, just to make sure I have it all correct. Okay, so what we have here now, let me just try to think of a good example, and we're going to say if I is, let's just go with if I is equal to 0, we're going to say I is 0. If I is less than 0, this one's got to be changed to negative. Yes, so that's going to be that. And then the else side of this, we're going to put system.out.println, and we're going to say I is positive. I is positive. Okay, there we go. Now, this is the statement here I was telling you about. So what we're going to do is we're going to give I a couple different numbers, and then we're going to see which condition it executes as. All right. So first thing, we're going to assign I as 0. And we're going to run this. We're going to see what it comes out to, and it says I is 0. So let's go through this logically and try to figure out why it executed it here. So this one's going to be pretty simple. It's going to look at the value of I. It's going to come down to this first condition statement, and it says, okay, well, is I equal to 0? Checks the value of I and says, yep, I got a match. I'm going to output I is 0. All right. So we understand that part, which is fine. And then we're going to say if it's going to be -2, this is going to make it a negative number. It's going to execute this line here, which says I is negative. And again, we're going to follow through the logic. And it's going to say, okay, well, I is assigned -2. It's going to come down to this first condition statement. It's going to look at the value of I. It's going to say, well, I is -2. -2 is not 0, so it can't be that condition. So let me go down to the next condition. It looks at this condition here and it says, well, I is less than 0, which is the case here because -2 is less than 0, and it would output I is negative. And then we can all see here as a third example, we all know which one this is going to do. It's going to say I is positive because it hasn't matched this condition here, which states that I is 0, nor is it less than 0, so it must be this one. So that is your if, else, if, and if statement. Next, we're going to jump into one more, which is called the switch statement. Now, let us first get the syntax for switch, because I was testing it out earlier and I just couldn't figure out how to get it done. So I think I got it now. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, we're just going to go back and use our variable here, call I. And you can think of a switch statement simply as just like an if, else, if statement, but it gives you much more conditions and it isn't as confusing. You can think of it that way. Okay, so first, before I do that, let me just go back a little bit. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this line of code here. I'm gonna cut that out, and then I'm gonna put it down here. So this is gonna kind of become a comparison, so you all can kind of see just logically and kind of understand how it works. The switch statement works in contrast to this if-else statement. So let me go ahead and do that now. So let's go ahead with switch, and it's going to be switch based on the variable here. So let me go ahead and assign I once again, and I is going to be assigned 0. The switch is going to be based on this variable here, and I think you then open up the little brackets here, and from here you'll have this thing called case, and I think it's case 0 or case whatever condition it's going to be, and we're going to say system.out.println. Just give me a couple minutes just to go through or just type out the code, sorry, and then I'll kind of explain it as I go. So that's the first one. We're going to say case -1, and we're going to say system.out.println. I is negative, if I could spell it correctly, come on, negative, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and break, And the next one, I can do another case, but I think it's default, if I'm not mistaken. Default. And we're going to call this system.out.println I is positive. So that's going to be that. Can't forget my semicolon here. And then we're going to go with the break. All right. So now that we got that finished here, let's go ahead and try to figure out how this works. So we have our integer variable here called I. We have the switch statement, which is going to be based on that variable. And then we have case 0, case -1, and default. So these case, you can think of the case as like your condition in your if and else statement. So case 0 meaning if you were to compare it to your if else statement, this case 0 is just like you typing if I is equal to 0. Down here is saying, okay, well, your first condition is if I is 0, you're going to execute this line in the condition statement. And then after that, you're going to break out of the switch statement, and then you're going to continue on with your line of code after. By saying -1 here, it's kind of like this, not exactly. The reason being is that this is a definite number, meaning that you would have to assign I as -1 here for it to catch on this. A little bit different than this statement here, which is saying that if any number is less than 0, it would execute this. But just for the sake of this video, this is kind of like, you know, just gradually getting you into the switch statement and just making sure that you understand how the two of these conditions statements work. And lastly, have your default, which is going to be basically like a bucket. What I mean by a bucket is if it runs through the statement and it doesn't match this criteria or this statement, if it doesn't match this statement, you can think of it as a catch-all bucket saying like, hey, if none of those two work for you, if your values don't match up to any of those two conditions, this is where it's going to fall. So you can think of it that way. All right. Hopefully I explained that well. If I didn't, go ahead and leave a comment stating that I didn't, and I'll make it better for the next live stream. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and execute this statement here, or this line of code with the switch statement. So first thing, we are going to run it, and it's going to say I is 0. And again, let's follow through the logic. So now it says I is assigned 0. I'm going to be looking at my switch statement based on I, and it's going to come here. Okay, well, is I going to be 0? Yes, I is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this, and this break means that that is the end of the switch statement. You're going to break out of this this whole section of code here. So if you in theory had another line of code after that, we're going to go ahead and test that out here. So we're going to say system.out.println. We're just going to say proceed. All right. And what is going to happen, again, using the exact same example, I is 0, it's going to come down here. It's going to come down here. It's going to match this case statement. It's going to execute or print out that line of text, which is I is 0. And because this line of text falls outside of your switch statement, it's going to break out of this line of code, as you can see here. Once you come down, after it has outputted I is 0 and you hit the break statement, it's going to break out of this section of code here, and then it's going to go ahead on processing throughout your line of code, which is going to then execute this statement saying proceed. So that's basically how that works with the break statement. And again, we're going to go ahead and change the value here to -1. We're going to go ahead and run it. And again, we are going to follow the logic here. So now it's going to say I is assigned -1. Let's look at I based on this switch statement. What's the first case? The first case is 0. Is -1 0? Absolutely not. So let's go on down to the next one. Hey, I found a case with -1 in there. Let's execute and display that I is negative, and then we're going to break out that section of break out that fragment of code and then proceed on. And what we're going to do then is to hit the default one, and we're just going to assign I as 30. Let's go ahead and run this now, and boom, it says I is positive. Again, following the logic, I is assigned 30. Let's do the switch statement based on the value of I. Is it this one? Is 30 0? No, it's not. Is 30 -1? No, I don't have a case or a condition exactly for 30, so it must fall in this default bucket, and this is where you get the I is positive. So, hope that explained the condition statements for you all. Hope this was very helpful. I know for me it was. And I'm going to go ahead and then move on to the next video in the series next week, where I am going to be learning some looping structures. We're going to be talking about the for, the forever, the while, the do while, all that good stuff. So stay tuned for next week. Again, thank you for joining. I'm checking my OBS studio right now. There's nobody in here. I'm talking to myself. But it's all good. Eventually, as I progress throughout the series, hopefully I might just get one of the viewers in here. Again, this is my series on learning Java. I'm going to try to do these weekly, providing, it's life. Hopefully there's not going to be any sort of issues that pop up. But I'm going to try to do it weekly as I learn and progress through Java, and then hopefully between I would say like middle of the year, late or year end, I should be able to pull all this information together to create some really good Java applications for you all. And then who knows, it might become a series for years and years. This is just the infancy stage. This is just the starting point. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully this video was helpful. Definitely leave a comment below. Let me know if it was helpful to you, if I made things much more confusing or not. All comments are welcomed. I take constructive criticism. You can like the video, you can dislike the video. I know YouTube doesn't show the dislike video, but I see it in YouTube Studios. Don't worry, it won't hurt my feelings. I use it as a form of constructive criticism to try and help make the videos a little bit better for next time. So, thank you all for joining. I'll see you hopefully next week, where we'll learn about some looping structures in Java. Thank you very much.